No.
Alright, so basically, just to give you a little background, John and I went down to Miami for the Office 365 deployment and implementation training. The last Office 365 presentation we had really didn't tell us too much about Office 365. It was just kind of about Office itself. So John and I tried to kind of fill in the blanks for you from the information we picked up while we were down there. The conference itself was focused on, like I said, implementation and deployment and migrations. Not so much on really the nuts and bolts functionality of it, but we did our best to try to fill in those gaps for you through our own research and poking around in it. So if there's any questions, just wait till we're at the end of the slide, because there's a lot of slides that we got to go through. Some of this stuff, you know, on the surface is not too bad. Once you get down into it, I mean, this stuff is hard. So if you have any questions, please stop us now, because if we go to the next point of it and you're confused, it's going to get you even further lost. So start off with, just wanted to start you out with what is Office 365. I didn't really go into, you know, the core components. You all know what they are. You all know what the plans are and what they include and what they cost. But, you know, who is that really? You know, the two primary plans are the P and the, I think it's the E plan, it's the next slide. But the P plan is basically professionals, small businesses. They don't really have any advanced IT needs. We can just pretty much just throw everything in Office 365 and call it a day. Basically, Office 365 professionals and small businesses, $6 per user per month. Subscription service lets you access your email, important documents, contacts, and calendar from virtually anywhere on almost any device. There are some limitations. We'll get into those later. This plan is ideal for organizations with fewer than 25 employees. It has a 50 employee cap. So anybody that's over 50 employees, the P plan will not work. You have to go to the next plan. Again, do not have any IT staff or expertise or advanced IT needs.
Can they migrate from the P plan to the E plan if they outgrow it?
Yes. Migrations are from plan to plan are not too bad as long as nothing on the internal infrastructure changes. So the next plan is the E family. Starts at $10 per user per month. They're designed for organizations with advanced IT needs. Some of the things that they do is Active Directory integration, advanced email archiving. They have 24/7 phone support. They have access to full enterprise voice capabilities with an on-premise link server, and you know they would want Office Pro Plus. Like something to note in here is if they have an Active Directory server, this is the plan that they have to be on. The P plan will not integrate with Active Directory. So if they want any integration with their current IT sets, so if they have, you know, applications that they don't want to manage two separate user IDs. You know, if they want SSO, if they want, you know, everything to be centrally located in Active Directory rather than completely managing two separate entities, they're going to have to be on the E plan. The deployment readiness tool, Terry, actually, can you, that bottom packet, not the top one, that one, can you pass that out?
So,
thank you.
The biggest portion of our customers are going to be on the E plan.
Correct. The largest portion. I mean, your strategic sales, they can go on the P plan, but the majority of customers will be on the E plan.
That'll work on any like SBS or any other type of server.
Yeah, and I'll get into that more later. Wait till I get to the Exchange portion. This is just kind of an overview. The deployment readiness tool is a really nifty little tool for Microsoft that basically scans the entire infrastructure and tells us problematic areas that we're going to have. It's extremely thorough. I ran the report on us and I printed it out for you guys to look at. This is just the first page, and these sections link to other pages. So just as a general overview, this is what the deployment readiness tool spits out. You know, before anybody would want to make that move to Office 365, it would be imperative that this tool be run and we take a look at all of the gotchas that are out there, because there's a lot of stipulations and things that would have to be changed, and things that don't work with it correctly. So this really outlines everything correctly. Just to give you an idea, these are the points that it really looks at. I'm not going to go over too many of those because it's not. You can read this yourself, and it gets a little bit more technical. This is more for the technical staff than the sales staff. But it looks at, the one thing to note is it looks at all the different areas: Exchange, Link, SharePoint, and end user experience, and the networking aspect, as well as the Active Directory infrastructure, to be able to diagnose that and find out where your problematic areas are going to be. If you want to take a look at that handout, it's all right there. There's the in-depth information. I don't really think we need to go over that too much though. The one thing that they did not talk about when we were on that last Office 365 is some of the features that are actually in the partner portal. There's some really neat little features that we can do in the partner portal. We can use it for marketing, we can use it for sales, and they didn't go over that, so I wanted to throw this in here. So one thing we can do is we can create purchase offers. So if we wanted to do an email marketing campaign for Office 365, we can actually have a purchase offer. It creates a URL that we can include in an email and send out to our customers. They click on it, and it automatically registers back to us because their subscription was generated through our purchase offer. It's unique to us. The URL is completely unique to us. Trial invitations, we can do the same thing with them. So if they activate the trial and they move to the subscription model, then it'll automatically link with our account because it came from a unique URL. Delegated admin requests. So this is, we have a customer that is, they have a subscription already, and we need to be able to access their account. Instead of having to log in with their credentials, we can actually log in with our own credentials, but we can be granted administrative rights on their account to provide technical support. And this is as simply as we can send out an email invitation to them and they accept it. That's it. And then their account is now linked with ours. We can provide technical support to them if we want to. Network deployment considerations. Obviously, there's a lot that happens on the network, a lot of information being sent off-site, a lot of information being synced back and forth. Just some of the network deployment considerations. You have to understand the network infrastructure. If ports are not open correctly, if the switch is not properly configured, if access controls are out of whack, then a lot of these features will not work. We have to understand the inbound, outbound internet routing. Same reasons, if it's not set up correctly, there are functionalities that just will not work and they will continue to fail. If they have proxy and firewall rules, there's separate routines that have to be followed in order to accommodate that. Bandwidth requirements is a big one. The initial sync for this can be, depending on the size of the Active Directory infrastructure, can be very, very, very bandwidth intensive. So they have to make sure that they have enough bandwidth, and there are ways to throttle it, but not by default is it throttled. So if we start this, at 10 o'clock, and they have no bandwidth, it could run for the next 3 days, depending on the size of the infrastructure, and there's nothing we can do to change that. Once it starts, it starts.
We can manage it through the edge device, though, right?
You could if they had that capability. It just depends on what box they have.
Make sure I really understand what you're saying. We used to have to babysit migrations, watch it, and restart, and people stay up all night, and it would take weekends to do stuff. As I understand Microsoft, there's some sort of agent you install, you hit a button, and it starts to go. And you don't really monitor anything, right?
No. Yes and no. Partly yes, but there's parts of it that have to be watched. I'll get into that in the next section. Just a couple other points, but I've already talked about it. The big thing about Office 365 is really the planning. We spent an entire probably 6 hours on the planning process. It's lengthy, just to make sure that every point is covered correctly. I mean, some of it, they went a little overboard, but I didn't get into the in-depth analysis of that, because that would have been a separate meeting all in itself. Something I don't know if you guys have seen is Office web apps compared to Google Docs. So what I did was basically found a comparison document, which will show you what something would look like in Office web apps versus what something would look like in Google Docs.
Has left the conference.
If you look at this, this is done in Office web apps. I don't have the tools, I cut that out just for size reasons. But you can see it pretty much looks like an Office document. If we duplicate that same document in Google Docs, that's what it looks like. So the functionality of Office web apps, even though it's limited and it's designed for light editing, is still above and beyond anything that Google Docs is going to put out. So I don't think you guys have actually seen a comparison, so I thought it was important that you guys actually see something.
Could you send that page specifically to sales staff?
Yeah.
I mean, it's in the PowerPoint, it's going to go on the portal. So
Okay, perfect.
you can pull everything out of it if you need to.
Okay.
That's just an intro, just overview. Is there any questions so far?
You mentioned a significant amount of planning effort.
Yes.
Any estimates on, for I don't know, one of our typical customers or something like that, what that would take?
It completely and totally depends on what comes out of that deployment readiness tool, because how complicated their infrastructure is going to dictate what that means. For your simple customers that just want, the exchange online and they don't want any integration with their on-site, it's relatively easy. It's much like AppRiver. But once you start integrating with on-premise resources, the complexity jumps up exponentially. So it's going to have to be taken on a case-by-case basis. There's not like a baseline where I can say it's going to start at X, Y, Z and go up from there.
So you're saying before we even present a proposal, we should run this?
It depends on what they want. If they want we have to ask them, basically we have to, as their advisors, we have to say, you are going to be better suited for just moving it all up there, or you have local resources, which we really need to, it's best practices to tie that back to. And if we have to tie it back to local resources, then that process needs to start before we can produce any sort of proposal.
Speaking of that process real quick, is it, what type of firewall ports generally need to be open, like LDAP or something like that? Or?
I've got all that information, Lee. I can get that to you. I didn't put that in here because I thought that was a little bit too technical, but I can send that to you. I can send that to you, and you can have all that information. I'll post all the technical information.
Maybe set up a template for Cisco ASA.
Yeah, I'll put all the John and I will put all the technical, the in-depth technical information in an Office 365 document folder on the portal, so you guys can reference back to that at any point in time.
One other quick question: what does it take to run that deployment guide?
It has to be ran on a domain member. Has to be run. I mean, technically it could go over site to site, but depending on how locked down they are, you could have problems. So realistically, it should be run on the same LAN as the primary domain controller, and it has to be run from a domain account that has access to the domain controller.
Is it processor intensive?
Not really, and it takes about 10 to 15 minutes for it to run. But you pretty much, there's no user interaction. Once you start it, it just starts all of its checks.
Does it require admin access or anything like that? So is this something that if we've got a customer that says, hey, I'm interested in this, we could shoot them this and say, hey, run it and then send me the output?
Yes. And if we have any errors with the checks, then we can address those individually.
Okay.
We're going to do these as part of the audit.
Is this something we
As
can...
of right now, it's integrated in the audit.
Okay.
So if the Office 365 is under consideration, the auditor will actually run these programs.
Okay.
But what about for existing clients, though?
Hmm?
You're talking about for
Same
new
thing.
clients,
Right.
right? But I'm saying for existing, they're saying, can they?
Right.
You're gonna-
We're not going to, unless they're on the CIO plan, we're not going to be able to tell them if the cloud works for them unless we do a project. We could do an hourly project or an audit.
How
We're
would
not
we
gonna go
over-
into our existing clients for free and do a cloud assessment.
How would we overcome the objection of the client saying, you've been managing me for 3 years, how is it you don't already know my environment and can't tell me if this is good for me or not? Why do I have to pay you to figure that out?
He stole the word right out of my mouth.
You should probably distinguish between the on-site cloud environment and how we understand their on-site environment, but the cloud environment is a new environment and, requires quite a bit of preparation to determine whether or not that's appropriate compared to the on-site.
I also think we probably should offer them a significant discount,
Okay.
maybe 25 to 50% off. It's just, guys, in the cloud, there's no money once you're in the cloud,
Huh.
right? You're like, okay, what's it, all we're gonna get is the assessment, and then the desktop support fees, help desk.
Right.
Migration project.
The project of assessment and the project of implementation. The other way we could do it is to build it into the into the project.
Well, that was my thought is we do that first so we can get our baseline, and then we can start building in, okay, it's gonna take this long. Almost kind of like we do sales engineering currently is we build it into the actual project itself.
Another thing that's kind of a side note to all this, we will do this for current clients now, for free. We'll terminate their existing managed service agreement and start up the cloud. We won't do the assessment for free, but what I'm saying is, they don't have to wait till the end of the contract to go to the cloud.
They can roll right into the cloud.
And we just terminate it, the cloud starts on the 1st of December, November 30th, I guess, is the last day of their premise. So that also allows us to do managed services deals without considering the cloud. We'll take it over as is, where is, and you can move to the cloud whenever you want. You with me?
Charging anything?
Because I don't think we're gonna, some customer just automatically renewed on a 3-year deal, they're not gonna wait 3 years to go to the cloud. All the cool kids are moving now, they wanna move now too.
Are we gonna charge anything for maintaining the cloud environment as far as, user creation, just managing
PC level.
general cloud tasks?
All that stuff will be in the PC plan.
Okay.
If a customer just wants to buy cloud from us, then they're gonna have to buy a flex time block.
And if they go to the more complicated scenarios, John, they're gonna have servers anyway, which would go under server management. I mean, we might wanna do like, I don't know, we might wanna do a reduced fee or something for them for management servers, Terry, but, that's something to figure out later. But, they're gonna have servers if they do on-site integration.
The PC plan fees don't change, right? And that's where all that administration is gonna be. Right, so, trying to think, every hour, there never is allowed to be an hour put against a cloud contract. Just like hosted exchange, you can't put time against it. Time is automatically billable. So you can go against the PC plan or it's prepaid block, but it can't go against hosting plan.
All right, ready to move on?
Real quick, as a BTA, if our revenue is gonna be made by selling the assessment upfront versus on the RMR?
You're gonna need an RMR. There'll be an RMR, won't be that much.
Right, so mainly the revenue is gonna be from the assessment, so we really have to get a lot from that upfront.
Implementation and assessment.
Okay. We're gonna need a strong deliverable then to be able to sell something for that price. As long as they see value in it, it's okay, but we have to come up with a deliverable that we can present to them.
The audit deliverables, the current version of that.
For cloud?
Yeah, basically, it's cloud or not, it's not really cloud or not cloud. We're gonna take a look at our environment and tell us the best place to put things. You know what I mean? Some things are cloud, some things are premise, some things are, premise. We're not gonna have a cloud assessment and not cloud assessment, it's just a best practice assessment. Based on your environment, we really recommend this goes here, this goes there.
Anything else? All right. All right, this is the beast. This is the hard one, so just bear with me. Like I said, if you have a question, just ask me at the end of the slide before I move on to the next one. The next slide might clarify, but just wait till I get to the end of the slide before you ask a question. Some of the models that are out there just will not make sense for our customers. You know, your extremely large enterprise environments, we'll tackle that on a special case basis. I touched on a couple of the topics, but I didn't really go into depth on it because we don't have any customers that it would fit. But for the BTAs, if you come across, you know, a large scale enterprise that wants 365 and wants help moving to 365, just come talk to me independently and we'll go over that, because that's where it gets really, really, really complicated, or John, either one. So I just kind of focused on the things that we're going to be dealing with most of the time. So to start off, just some of the benefits that come with going to Office 365 Exchange Online is there's a really low upfront cost. Obviously they don't have to buy a server, they don't have to buy software, I mean it's all included. They've got redundant geo data centers, so they've got several locations in several areas of the country that will service Office 365. They use enterprise level hardware, far bigger and better than anything we can purchase. You always have the latest software, so they don't have any ongoing maintenance fees or subscription fees to keep going. They just pay their normal monthly basis fees. Enterprise capabilities, such as Exchange Unified Instant Messaging and PBX replacement using link servers. There's a lot of the big boy toys that come into play with 365. And spam and virus scanning is included using Forefront Security. What did they call that, 40 or something?
They're still working on that. I know they were a month away from getting the
Forefront?
version of
Well, it's
Forefront.
based on Forefront.
Yeah.
They're doing some expanded capabilities of it, but
They have like a beta name for it. Or
yeah, I can't remember the name for it.
Currently, you don't have access to the management side of it.
But it still does the spam and virus filtering. It's not like it doesn't work, you just don't have access to control it.
It'll be available. Like it's on there, but it's currently grayed out. And it's just because they don't have all the kinks.
So would that mean currently we would want to basically sell the Tap River spam
that's
filtering or no?
Not
No.
even compatible.
You can't bypass it.
Okay.
It's coded in there, that's
Is
what
it-
happens.
Is it like hardware at the gateway or is it software?
I don't know how they have that set up. I mean, that's in
Probably
their data
both.
center. It's probably running on dedicated hardware, load balanced with the software installed. But I mean, I don't know what their data center looks like, so I don't know. So some of the limitations, these are important. So take any notes that you might need to understand it. Public folders are not available. It's in talks to bring public folders into it with Exchange 2015. But as of right now, they are not supported. It's only supported via SharePoint. Outlook 2003 and earlier, not supported. So they have to be on 2007 or 2010. I firmly envision them probably phasing out 2007, especially when Exchange 2015 comes out. Directory synchronization services, we'll talk about that in depth later. It does not sync dynamic distribution lists. For those of you that don't know what dynamic distribution lists are, you know what distribution groups are. Basically, those are things that, like if, say you had a college and you had a department and those people are changing, if you change their department, it automatically updates the distribution list so you don't have to manually manage that. So if they have those in place and the deployment readiness tool will show that, those will not migrate. They have to be manually recreated. No BlackBerry support yet. Bez is supposed to be releasing a hosted version in Q1 of 2012.
If they even exist then, for free.
Very true. But as of right now, it is not supported. There is a 30-day max recovery time for deleted items. After 30 days, there is nothing that can be done. SMTP relay, now this would be for like applications. If it has to send mail through the Exchange server, you have to have an active mailbox with a license in order to do it. It has to authenticate. You can't just you can't just relay through it just because you have a username and password. It has to have an active mailbox with an active license. There's no public-private computer logon in OWA. So right now you can choose like it's a public computer, don't cache anything. It's not there. And there's
Does that mean that it doesn't cache everything? Or it does?
It does.
So it treats everything as a private computer?
Correct. The timeout is 6 hours. So if they leave their computer for 6 hours, come back, they have to re-log in. Some customers are kind of picky on this. There's nothing that can be done to change it. It is 6 hours. It will be 6 hours, and there's nothing we can do. The message size limits is 25 megabytes in Outlook and 10 megabytes in OWA.
Why is there a difference?
Huh?
Why is there a difference?
It's the way they've done it. I don't really have a technical explanation why, but that's what it is.
I'll wait till the end of the.
So what happens in a situation like that if I've got 20 megs in my Outlook and I log into OWA, what do I not see?
Yeah, that was gonna be my question.
Wait,
It's,
explain.
I've got a 20 meg mailbox that I use with Outlook.
No, this
No,
is
no,
outgoing
message
messages.
size.
Oh, message size limit.
Yeah,
I thought it
so
was-
you can't send an attachment over 10 megs in OWA.
Gotcha. Never
How
mind,
about,
sorry.
receive?
Receiving, it would be the
It's
same
the
thing, it's
25.
send and receive, so
So-
it's the same thing.
I guess my question is, so if you use OWA and Outlook, if you're on the road and you're using OWA or whatever, and then you go back to your office.
Well,
and get
receiving is
Outlook,
gonna be your hire, I mean, it can't distinguish what you're at, it's not gonna matter what you're accessing it via. So it's gonna be 25 megs for receiving.
Okay. I guess that kind of muddies the water even further. Why would you not be able to send from?
It's probably because server restrictions, like they may have, like, they don't have as powerful of servers running OWA, because they don't have as many requests, so throwing a 25 meg attachment at it could cough it up.
Some of these limitations are actually kind of nice. We don't control them. It is what it is. This is Microsoft's limitations, and if that doesn't work for you, we can sell you a premise-based Exchange server. I mean, if there's limitations on here that don't work for you, we can't change them, but we've got another option.
These particular limitations are Microsoft's recommendations for an on-premise Exchange server. So this particular limitation is not really differing, it's just.
Well, there's a difference between a limitation and a recommendation.
Well, that's correct, because you can configure it on an on-premise Exchange server, but it doesn't really matter, because if somebody else has set the correct limitations on the other side, you're not going to be able to do anything else anymore.
Right.
Alright, so moving on, each mailbox can send to 1,500 different users per day maximum. So people that are blasting out marketing campaigns through their mailbox, they can do 1,500 users per day, like total. So if they have 1,499 email addresses, they can only send to one extra email address per day. It doesn't matter, like, you can't change it, it's set.
But so if I've got a distribution group with 1,500 users in it, and
It's to keep them whitelisted.
I send that one email to that distribution group that's got 1,500, that's the only email I'm sending that day.
Correct. Well, no, you can send other emails, you just can't send them to any new email addresses. So like, it doesn't count reused email addresses, it's just new email addresses going into the to field.
Gotcha.
Recipients.
Correct. The maximum recipients is 500 addresses. I guess my example really wasn't good, but so basically you can compose an email message and you can send it to 500 people. It won't go 501. 500 people is your max. SSL certificates are required and has to be issued by public trusted entities, so they have to buy an SSL certificate. You can't do internally hosted SSL certificates. There's a 99.9% uptime guarantee. Basically, it equates out to 8.77 hours of downtime per year. They can't pay to have any, like, you know, if they require higher uptime, they cannot pay extra to have higher uptime. It's 99.9% across the board. It's not a lot of downtime, but I just wanted to throw it up there in case somebody wanted higher.
When they say guarantee, what happens if they have
They
10 hours?
financially back it. I don't know what the recoup is, but they do financially back it.
Okay.
You can lodge a complaint and they will probably credit you.
The prorated value of the,
Probably.
what, it's $6 a year is approximately a penny per day.
Yeah,
No,
per
actually,
email
Actually,
address.
hey,
Actually, it'd be
I
like
was
2
looking
pennies
at
a
the
day.
slides. I have a couple
It's 2
questions
pennies a
on,
day.
like, limitations.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you said the dir sync does not sync dynamic distribution lists. So you can recreate them and you can still have dynamic distribution lists, you just can't upload them. Okay.
Now granted, dynamic distribution lists, they will require, I mean, realistically, to support them, you're gonna have to have, you know, SharePoint included or something like that, because that's really the only way to do it with them, because we can't do custom third-party apps to integrate with it. But, you know, I mean, if you have the DirSync going, then it's not a problem, but if you just are on Exchange Online Management, it wouldn't make sense to, it wouldn't be able to do them without SharePoint.
Okay. Timeout, you said 6 hours. Can you have it so that it's less?
No.
Or is it just 6 and
It's
that's
6
6? Up, down, all right. I guess that was it. All right, go ahead.
Alright, so here's,
All right, Eric's got one.
oh, sorry.
I don't even know what part of your presentation my question fits in, so if you touch on this
Alright.
later, then let me know. But when you talked about like you have something doing SMTP relay,
Mhm.
assuming like a scanner or something like that that emails stuff out
Mhm.
that you scan,
Correct.
can that be on a different plan than everybody else, and can it be in a different suite? Could you put that on a K plan and have all your other users on like a E2 or something
Did
like
they
that?
allow cross-plan? I think they did.
They allow cross plans with the kiosk. They do not allow cross plans from P to E. So you cannot have people on the P plan, that low-end SMB, and have people on the
Because they're
enterprise
AD
plan.
and
You can't do that.
I don't think kiosk supports SMTP relay, so basically the answer is no, you can't do
That would be an example of like an advanced IT need. I mean, when you think like the P plans, you think basically everything that they've got is in Office 365. Nothing else integrates with it. All right. So some of the tools to manage Exchange Online, you've got the Exchange Control Panel, which is the Office 365. I mean, that's hosted. You can manage email addresses and do all the Exchange stuff. The Microsoft Online Portal, which would be to assign licenses, create users, et cetera, et cetera. Exchange Management Shell, you can redirect PowerShell. In fact, you have to have one or the other. At one of the bottom two, Exchange Management Shell or Exchange Management Console. If you're integrating with an on-premise Active Directory controller, because the other things at the top you can't do a whole lot with. So some of the things that you would want to do in Exchange, you can only do via PowerShell or in the Exchange Management Console. The Exchange Management Console basically would have to be installed on an Exchange server. There's an option when you install Exchange 2010 that says, is it cloud, hybrid, or is it just cloud? If it's just cloud, that's a free Exchange license, because all it's doing is serving as a conduit for management to the actual data store. So they have a free license for that. They just have to have a server to have that on. Now that can be running on like a virtual server, a Hyper-V server, or something like that. So if they have that functionality, you can just throw it up on that, and they don't have to purchase any additional hardware. I mean, you could technically you could run that on a desktop that you install Windows Server on too. That you can just run for the Exchange Management Console. If it's down, it's not going to affect Office 365. So the online portal, what can you do in the online portal? You can provision mailboxes, manage common user properties, create and manage service requests, and domain management. This is again the high level. This isn't the mailbox level portion of it. This is the high level. What has to be done here is password resets, managing permissions for cross-service subscriptions. So like your SharePoint permissions versus your Exchange permissions. License assignment, and SharePoint and link administration. Licensing, every mailbox has to have a license. You have to, even if it is auto-created by the DirSync application, you have to manually assign a license to it.
An Outlook license or?
A
Exchange
Office
account?
365 license.
What about resources? Like resources?
Resource mailboxes do not require a license.
Do we manage their licensing, or is that something that they keep?
It's in Office 365, so they have access to it, we have access to it, they can make changes, we can make changes.
Okay.
We can make changes if they've granted a shared admin access.
So what happens if you forget to assign a license? Because that's going to be a common question. All right, Exchange allows a 30-day grace period. It's not a trial, it's just a grace period. So you throw up that mailbox, it has an email address, it's receiving mail, they can access it for 30 days. If you don't end up assigning a license, the user's prevented from logging on, but mail continues to be delivered. So it's not going to just say, okay, you're screwed, we're just going to reject all mail. It's going to continue to accept mail, the user just can't get to it. The admin can log on, assign a license, and it will give that user access back. So, it's something that can be turned off and on. All right, this is where it gets complicated, is once it starts getting into the identity, which is authentication models and foundation setups. John, if I miss anything, just jump in. So the Microsoft Office 365, you can implement password policies just as you would on-premise. So you can do complexity requirements and expirations and resets, et cetera, et cetera. You can implement single sign-on with corporate credentials, so your Active Directory username and password can be passed through and will just authenticate you to all your other services in Office 365. You only have to use one password and it's centrally managed versus having to have a username and password, like AppRiver, having an AppRiver username and password and then your local username and password. You can just merge the two. Directory synchronization updates, so if you have an Active Directory controller, push those changes up to Office 365, so if you create a user, it'll create one. If you delete one, it'll delete it. If you disable it, it'll disable it. So you can centrally manage through Active Directory. Role-based administration, so these are the 5 roles that you can assign to the users currently, which gives them permissions to different areas of Office 365, a company admin, a billing admin, user account admin, help desk admin, and service support admin. And then obviously the admin on behalf of 4 support partners. All right, here's your 3 models that that is available in Office 365. Your MS Online IDs. It's appropriate for smaller organizations without an AD on-premise. Obviously, no servers are required at all because it's centrally managed up in Office 365, no integration back to local resources. Some of the drawbacks, you can't do SSO, which is single sign-on, no two form factor authentication. There's 2 sets of credentials, and your IDs are controlled in the cloud, not on-premise.
What would the 2 sets of credentials, that'd be like,
Whatever you do
That's like having AppRiver, username and password. And
right, so in this scenario, if everything's in the cloud, the 2 credentials would be, one, I've got credentials to log into my PC, and then I've got credentials to log into the cloud. Okay.
MS Online IDs plus directory synchronization services, medium-large organizations with AD on-premise. Some of the pros are users and groups mastered on-premise. It enables coexistence scenarios, so hybrid scenarios on-premise plus cloud, which is going to be most of our clients. Some of the cons, you still can't do single sign-on with this. There's no two form factor authentication. The 2 sets of credentials demand, you've still got 2 sets of credentials, but so much like AppRiver, but like I said, it starts to integrate, like SharePoint will pull from Active Directory information, so you don't have to manage 2 separate user profiles. Everything is in Active Directory, and then it replicates up to the cloud. Whereas if you've got just MS Online IDs, whatever you do in Active Directory, you're going to have to replicate that in MS Online. And it's done with a single server deployment. A server is required for directory synchronization services. We'll get more into that in a little bit. Now the single sign-on availability comes to federated IDs with directory synchronization services. Basically, The simple way to describe federation, and I'll show you you'll see some actual layout so it'll make it easier to understand. When you federate a domain, it essentially is, they've got a domain up in Office 365. So it's infinity.on.com or microsoftonline.com or whatever. You got your domain back here at the office, which would be Infinity IT. What it's doing is it establishes a trust between those two relationships. So when a user tries to log in, it's into Office 365 services, it's going to look back to the federation servers that synchronize with Active Directory to say, is this valid? If it's valid, it's going to give them a token and say, here you go, and then Office will authenticate them. It'll become clear in a second. I know it's complicated.
What are these? Are these options to buy?
No, these are deployment scenarios. Basically, how they do their authentication, it's going to fall into one of these three categories.
Okay.
They have to pick one.
Okay, and I'm going to say this because you got to remember your audience. Yeah, this is where the solutions engineer, right? The purpose of this is to really help you understand there's a whole lot more to this than, you know, do they want hosted email, right? There's a lot of technical things that you may or may not conceptually understand, but there's no expectation here that anyone in the sales organization will be able to determine which one's appropriate for each customer.
Well,
But are these
because
different
we're on
costs,
one,
or-
that last one?
Are these different costs?
They come with different costs because of on-premise resources required, management fees. So everyone, I mean, obviously.
They don't have different costs in terms of the Microsoft Office
Correct.
license.
Correct.
But they've got,
Office is the same.
they've got peripheral costs that you're gonna have to.
And it's going to
Factor.
increase. So the more, like, you know, your level 1, your MS Online IDs is going to be your cheapest way to go because nothing's required on site. This requires at least one, the middle one requires one server, so they're going to have at least a cost of a server. This requires more than one server. So it's obviously going to increase as the more complicated they get.
Well, the middle one requires one additional server.
Correct.
Because you have to have an Active Directory server that's hosting, and you have to have a DirSync server. Currently, it only runs on.
I got that
servers
down. Hold on. Let me get to that first.
But I guess
Jumping ahead.
my question is, if you have an extra server dedicated to this, why wouldn't you be able to do single sign-on? Isn't that the advantage of getting?
I'll get that. Let me get to the diagrams and you'll see what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
options 1 and 3 are what most categories people are going to fit into. 2 is kind of, you can do it, but there's not a whole lot of advantages to it for having on-premise equipment.
Actually, John, you're wrong on that one. In order to do a lot of the coexistence options like uniform gals and such like that, you're going to have to at least have the second package with a directory synchronization server. To be perfectly honest, I disagree with you on one point. Most of our clients are going to fit in the first one or the second one. The third one requires so much cost to maintain it that it wouldn't make sense for them a lot of the time.
You said they'd want it, but
Right.
they're not going to be willing to pay for it.
Exactly. All right, so just hold your questions for a second because I promise I'll get easier. So this basically is going to kind of visualize what I just told you. So your first scenario is going to be your Microsoft Online IDs. All right, so they've got the authentication platform in the Microsoft Online services. So when a user logs in, they're logging in directly into the authentication. They're authenticating against the Microsoft authentication platform. And then that Microsoft authentication platform is going to authenticate them to Exchange, to SharePoint, and to Link. The second one is the online IDs plus directory synchronization services. At that point, your DirSync application goes to this provisioning platform, which then has a directory store. So all of the user information from Active Directory is stored in this directory store for coexistence environment. And the password, you're still authenticating against the authentication platform at Microsoft Online Services. The third, and this is just demonstrates it, so obviously once you log in, your user credentials, since they're synchronized, the user properties, since they're synced up, so your user account, think of this as, in this case, think of this as like your password repository. So your user ID is going to come to the directory store, your password is going to authenticate with here, and then of course you can get to your individual subscriptions. The third one is the federated IDs plus directory synchronization services. Now, if you notice with the authentication platform, it pulls a trust back to the federation servers. So that's where it changes. Once that's there, then single sign-on is possible.
So what you're saying, is I understand this, is that you can either, you have to log in once to your network, if you even have a network, once to your PC or network,
Correct.
and then once to SharePoint, or to Office 365 on the first two scenarios.
Correct.
The last scenario is you log in once to the domain and it automatically authenticates everything and you're done.
Correct.
But if you're at home, you're not on your company network, then it's gonna bypass that and go straight to
Well, even
federated.
if you're on like a home PC, then you're gonna have to log in with those with your domain credentials. Once you log in with those domain credentials, it'll pass through all over the place with the third option. If you've got like a laptop, like you have a laptop, right, that's on the domain, so your domain credentials, regardless if you're in the office or outside of the office, are still gonna pass through.
I don't have to VPN back into my home network and then.
Correct.
The third option keeps it to where everything works basically the same as if you had it on premise, other than the feature limitations that we're going over. It requires a minimum of 3 servers, whether the virtual.
Hold on that, because let me get the visual up before you start talking about that. All right, so for the third scenario, which is your federated IDs, this is essentially your deployment options with the federated server. So you can do a single server configuration where basically you have one ADFS server. So you have your Active Directory domain controller and a Active Directory federation server. So you have 2 total servers.
Why doesn't it say single server configuration?
Because it's assuming that you have an Active Directory. That's just assumed, because you have to have this regardless. So it's only saying you need 1 server to run ADFS.
So what additional server?
Correct.
So to go to the cloud, they have to buy an extra premise-based server if they want the federated.
They're going to have to require, or if they want the federated, they're going to be required to at least buy 1 more. Yes. Now, the problem that just want to point out there, which is the big problem with having 1 single server configuration, if this server goes down, nobody can authenticate at all.
But I'm guessing that the server resources for that are probably not particularly robust.
No, they're not robust.
So I could take a file server that they've got there that's in decent shape, that's got a warranty, pull all my files off it, throw it up to SharePoint, and now I've got this old file server and turn it into ADFS.
Yes.
Still a single point of failure though.
This server becomes paramount. Without
You're
this,
actually better off from a business continuity standpoint, not using that.
well, this is where the second model comes in, which is you can, with ADFS, you can load balance. So you can have 2. You can have your backup. So you can take this one down, and this will still function. Of course, this requires 2 servers, right? The third,
They could be virtual.
they could, yes. The third is if you're throwing ADFS proxy servers in place. This would be like, this is one of those things, it doesn't apply to any of our clients, but I'm just throwing it out there if you have like enterprise level clients that you would talk to that would want more complicated. It is possible to throw it in a controlled environment or a DMZ as a proxy, and then throw it to authenticate against Active Directory.
And that's actually Microsoft's recommended configuration. If you add an additional Active Directory server in there, their minimum recommendation for security, redundancy, they want to cover their own butts, so their minimum recommendation is 6 servers for.
So we want to save you a lot of money by moving you to the cloud, but first you're going to need to buy 6 servers.
Well, there is the option of moving those 6 servers into the cloud.
Yeah.
So that's something to consider.
If we did that, we'd almost have to have it in some type of package.
Well, one of the things that we're working on, we discussed while we were out there, which isn't possible yet, but will be possible by at most Q1 of next year, is that we can host the federation services. So it is possible that we might be able to get to that point so that if they want single sign-on, they can utilize our resources to facilitate that. It's complicated, I'm not gonna get into it, but it's not possible right now, but in Q1 of next year, it will be possible.
Well, that's well, there you go.
Alright, so moving on, this basically for single sign-on, I just basically took this and this will show you kind of the flow of what happens to visualize what happens with SSO because I know it's complicated. So you've got your customer on-premise with your ADFS server which synchronizes with your Active Directory. You've got the Microsoft Online Services with the authentication platform and then whatever resource you're trying to access. Okay, so what happens from the client computer is that it goes to access the resources. It basically says, whatever the resource is, says you need to authenticate against whatever, either Microsoft Online Services or the customer premise, but you need to authenticate. So it goes back to the computer, which will then go to the authentication platform and MS Online, which will say that it's federated, so it needs to go back to authenticate against Active Directory. It'll go to the ADFS server, which again synchronizes with Active Directory. It's then given a token. Whatever the user information is, it's given a token. That goes back to the client, to the authentication platform, which then Microsoft, since it's got the trust backwards, will give it the Microsoft token. All with one username and password, and then it will authenticate against the resource that it is trying to access. Does that make sense? Is anybody confused?
Let me ask you kind of a pulse, guys, is this confusing you in sales?
No.
Tyler, I think you're way too technical, man.
It is for me. I mean,
You're just gonna blow away sales.
I'll sit down with John and you know what? I think it's good though because it's we need to be able to explain to the customers why this is complicated.
I'm unable to do that right
Why
now.
do you need to?
I need to, I'll sit down with
I
John.
think that's the Tennessee's job.
The reason this is
Don't you think?
complicated.
Maybe it's important for you to know it. I'm concerned that we're gonna lose the team because right now we need to keep it pretty high level to understand the conceptual difference between the three. It's not sales role. They're not gonna be able to tell the customer what to do, or nor explain really the difference between them, right?
Right, but a lot of times the way I look at things, and I mean I could be wrong, is that a lot of times sales doesn't really understand the complexity that something might be. And I think even though I understand that this is over a lot of people's heads, there's half the room is kind of grasping it, half the room it's going to be way over your head, you at least can now grasp the concept that this stuff is complicated and requires a lot of planning and a lot of technical expertise to be able to accomplish this. Whereas now you visualize it. Now you know. It's not just me saying, hey, this stuff's complicated.
What he's giving us is now Ryland knows what he doesn't know.
And now
he's able to tell the customer that I know what you don't, or this is what you don't know. You think you know everything, but there's all this other stuff back there.
I mean, I can skip all this if you want me to, Terry.
No, I'm not really wanting to do anything. I just see some eyes glazing over, you know, and I just want to make sure that we keep everyone focused. Is there a lot more of this grade, or is it going to go back up?
No,
to
it goes back. I just have a couple diagrams to
Perfect.
The reason that this is so complicated is because Microsoft is basically saying, we're not going to hold any of your critical Active Directory information, passwords, and leave them internet facing. So whenever a user needs to authenticate, it redirects back to the company's servers. So Microsoft doesn't have any of your critical information internet facing. So that's basically why that model is so complicated and the authentication bounces around all over the place. So.
All right, so just a quick slide, just to kind of summarize. Basically, this is the preparation steps in preparing for Identity Federation. I'm not going to go into depth about it. I just wanted you guys to see it and it to be there for reference later on. These are some of the domain requirements and the Active Directory structures that are required in order to be able to do this. So, like some people have, you know, a corporate .local domain. So this is kind of breaks it down into what's required to make those individual domains work. Again, reference back to it. The deployment scenarios, I'm just kind of touching back on what I've already said, just to summarize. Your Office 365 only is for your smaller organizations, doesn't require a server on site. It can be integrated with Active Directory and Directory Sync if there's another server on site. You do get full management capability, so it's not like they're limited from that aspect. Hybrid or coexistence requires directory sync. There's no options. If they have local resources, you have to have it. There's just no other option. And requires, at that point, it basically, technically it doesn't require it. Microsoft is basically telling us that don't do it. That it requires that on-site premise server with that free license of Exchange for Management Console. And it simplifies things for us too. And then at that point, they can be federated to support single sign-on. What's Directory Synchronization Services? Synchronizes Active Directory with Office 365. It comes already pre-installed with SQL 2008. It's designed as an appliance. You basically don't do anything to it unless there's a problem. You just let it go.
Hey Tyler?
Yeah.
Can we actually pause and switch the tape?
Sure.
You didn't pause. You tilted your head.
Sorry.
We're gonna need to reshoot that.
Yeah, you rewind.